Shrinekeeper, tell me about the next lord.
Rest at the bonfire, and let me tell you the story of Nito, the first of the dead. Nito's body is that of an immense humanoid skeleton, but far from normal. His ribcage is torn open, packed with dead matter, and his torso leans forward unnaturally, giving him a hunched posture. His true skull is buried within this mass of bones and rot, surrounded by the remains of countless others. His legs are asymmetrical. One resembles that of a human, while the other is shaped like a beast's, perhaps canine. This grotesque design gives Nito a slow, limping gait, not just a sign of decay, but also of imbalance. Other skeletons cling to his body, forming something like armor. Rib cages, skulls, and limbs are embedded into him, draping his torso and limbs in a macabre display of death. He is less a single being and more a walking ossuary. Nito once wore a cloak that looked like black feathers or coarse fur, a shroud that seemed to conceal everything beneath. This cloak isn't always visible. It manifests after he emits a glowing lavender-white vapor, likely the infamous miasma of death he commands. When dormant, he appears without it, only shrouding himself in death's cloak when active. His left arm is shaped like a human's, but his right is a fusion of 3 skeletal forearms, forming a jagged bone blade covered in the same deadly miasma. As for his origins, Nito is one of the primordial humanoids who first appeared in the dark beneath the world after the first flame was born. That flame brought disparity, heat and cold, life and death, light and dark, and in that newfound contrast, beings like Nito emerged. He was one of the few who discovered a Lord Soul, an ancient, powerful fragment within the flame. Alongside Gwyn, the Witch of Izalith, and the furtive pygmy, Nito took his place among the new lords. At some point, Nito died, but thanks to the power of his Lord's soul, death didn't end him. Instead, it transformed him. He returned as a living embodiment of undeath, a creature formed of countless skeletons and rotting souls. This was the birth of the first of the dead. Not first in the sense of being the first to die, but the first of a new kind of being, a creature of undeath not bound by the natural cycle. With his Lord's soul, Nito learned to wield a dark power capable of bringing death to all living things. He poured this essence into the Gravelord's sword, a weapon forged from the bones of the fallen and tainted with a deadly miasma, capable of withering even the strongest foes. Nito did not conquer or rule, but instead retreated to the tomb of the giants, surrounding himself with death and silence. There, he became a forgotten god, worshipped by necromancers, feared by mortals, and bound to the cycle of fire and ash, like all who touched the flame. After claiming his Lord's soul, Nito would go on to join forces with the other lords, Gwyn, the Witch of Izalith, and the furtive pygmy, in their war against the everlasting dragons. While Gwyn shattered the dragon's stone scales with lightning and led his silver knights into battle, and while Izalith and her daughters conjured devastating firestorms that scorched the arc trees and burned the dragons from the skies, Nito took a different role. He brought decay. Unleashing his miasma of death, Nito rotted the arc trees from within and spread pestilence and suffering through the ranks of the dragons. His power wasn't one of direct destruction. It was rot, poison, corruption, and it was just as lethal. Together, the lords fought a long and brutal war, but in the end, the dragons were defeated. Their once immortal forms were torn apart, their dominion ended, and from the ashes of their world, the Age of Fire began. In the aftermath, Gwyn built his radiant city of Anorlando. Izalith raised her own city in her name, but Nito withdrew. He returned to the deep places of the world, to the catacombs, a vast necropolis hidden beneath the surface, and even deeper still, into the tomb of the giants. There, among the remains of colossal and bestial creatures, Nito made his domain, a place untouched by sunlight, where death itself was absolute. His power turned these caverns into a realm of silence and rot, and his presence alone seemed to smother all light and warmth. The Tomb of the Giants also became the resting place for the fallen gods of Anorlando and their faithful clerics, a sign of continued cooperation between Nito and Gwyn. While Gwyn ruled the living, Nito would rule the dead. And so, Nito gave up much of his Lord soul to sustain death itself, taking on the role of Gravelord, an eternal steward of the end. But he did not do this alone. With the emergence of the undead, a cursed race born from the fading of the first flame, Nito took measures to preserve the balance. The undead were beings who refused to die, and that was a threat to his domain. To deal with them, he created the Finito, shadowy beings capable of weaving death. They served Nito directly, guarding the boundary between life and death, and were entrusted with his curved phantom blade, Dark Drift. To them, death was not something to fear, but something inevitable and fair. They believed that life was suffering, and that in the end, all things must embrace death. He also brought forth the Milfanito, ethereal women with little identity or will of their own, created for one purpose: to sing. Their songs were not ordinary music, but haunting hymns meant to comfort the undead and soothe their restless souls. These beings lived only to sing, and would continue until their voices could no longer rise. Some brave humans, drawn to Nito's tomb and willing to serve, formed the Gravelord Servants, an ancient covenant bound by death. Wielding copies of the Gravelord sword and gifted with deadly eyes of death, they served a singular purpose: to spread misery. Using the eyes of death, these servants could infect other worlds with a curse, summoning hostile black phantoms to torment the living. Each successful act of corruption produced more eyes of death, which the servants returned to Nito as tribute. In exchange, he gifted them powerful miracles, necromantic sorceries that conjured phantom blades from the abyss. And for his most faithful, those who brought the most ruin, Nito offered a greater miracle, a manifestation of their success in propagating death across countless worlds. Nito also taught his corpse art, a grotesque form of necromancy, to followers who sought to become like him. These disciples would fuse the bodies of 3 humans into a single entity, creating abominations that mimicked Nito's skeletal form. But his influence reached even further. At one point, Nito devised a ritual known as kindling, a way to increase the power of bonfires, allowing undead to draw more estus from them. The cost was humanity, fragments of the dark soul. This ritual, adopted by the clerics of the Way of White, became part of their religious rites. Undead could perform the same rite by offering humanity at bonfires, hinting at Nito's deep integration into the divine systems of the gods. It was even through this system that Gwyn and his followers sought a chosen undead, one who would ultimately link the flame and sacrifice themselves, just as Gwyn once had. In the end, Nito's legacy is one of silence, of unseen influence. He did not speak to mortals, nor did he raise cities or armies. But he shaped the world in his own way, not through conquest, but through decay, through inevitability, through death. But not all who entered the catacombs came to worship death. At a certain point in time, a group of occultists, mortals bearing forbidden knowledge and power, descended into Nito's domain. Their goal was audacious: to steal Nito's mortal power and use it against the gods themselves. A heretical rebellion born of ambition and desperation. But the catacombs were no place for the living. The occultists were never heard from again. Consumed by the shadows, their bones likely now resting beside the many others who had entered and failed. Whatever power they sought, Nito would not surrender it so easily. And yet, not all of them failed. One among them, a figure known only as Pinwheel, managed the unthinkable. This strange, malformed being successfully stole a fragment of Nito's power, as well as the rite of kindling, a sacred rite that allowed bonfires to be further empowered. With this stolen knowledge, Pinwheel continued his twisted necromantic studies and raised a following of necromancers who settled within the catacombs. These dark scholars animated the bones of the dead, forming skeletal armies to serve them. Even in his slumber, Nito's domain had become infested with impostors. His power echoed through the halls, misused and warped. And so, time passed. The world changed. Eventually, a chosen undead would rise. An accursed warrior fated to either bring about the Age of Dark or prolong the Age of Fire. This undead would overcome the trials of Lordran, ringing the bells of awakening, conquering Sen's fortress, and reaching the golden city of Anor Londo, where they would be granted the Lord Vessel, a key to unlocking the path to the lords who once shaped the world. Guided by King Seeker Frumpt, the undead would descend into the catacombs, just as so many others had, in search of Nito. They would pass through the necromantic legions, brave the black abyss of the Tomb of the Giants, and finally arrive at the sarcophagus where the Lord of Death lay dreaming. But there would be no diplomacy. In the end, the Chosen Undead would challenge Gravelord Nito and slay him, claiming what remained of his Lord's soul to fill the Lord Vessel. The Age of Fire demanded sacrifice, and even the first of the dead could not escape its grasp. Gravelord Nito is more than just a boss hidden deep within the darkness. He is death incarnate, the first to die, the first to rise, and the one who embraced the role no other dared to take, shepherd of mortality. He waged war against dragons with rot and decay, shaped the fate of countless souls through his necromantic legacy, and watched over the dying world from his blackened tomb. And yet, like all things touched by the flame, his story ends in silence. Consumed by the very cycle he once helped create, Nito's death is not merely an act of violence. It's a grim reminder that even lords fall, even gods fade, and even death must die. His legacy remains scattered in the dust-choked halls of the catacombs, in the cursed blades of Gravelord servants, and in the whisper of every soul that fears the dark. In a world where nothing truly dies, Nito's silence speaks louder than ever.